Welcome to another episode of Great Minds Drink Alike. I'm your host, Robin Robbins, and this is the podcast where I invite brilliant entrepreneurs, great marketers, just generally cool people to hang out with me, talk about marketing, business strategies, how to be more successful in life. And of course, we got to have a drink while we're doing it. All right. So we're just getting started right now. So cheers, everybody. Here's to you. Here's to another week in the can there, almost done here on Friday. And what I want you to do while we're waiting for everybody to join us live is go to the comments section and post where you're calling in from, where you're watching, I should say, from. And see, I'm old school. So I say calling in. I still think we're like in the 1980s or something. And let me know where you are in this great, big, wide world of ours. And let me know what you're drinking, even if it's just a cup of coffee. Maybe you're having a beer. Maybe you're just having a glass of juice, whatever. Cheers to you. Post that in the comments. And while you're there, make sure you find the subscribe button, because you want to join and subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode, because you never know who I'm going to have. In this particular episode, somebody I think is really kind of unique and out of the normal type of people that I interview. But I'm super excited about it. I've been looking forward to this podcast ever since we got it scheduled. I was introduced to Mitzi Perdue by my good friend, Dr. Nito Cobain. And a lot of you know Nito is a mentor and a friend of mine. He is the president of High Point University and is absolutely brilliant. So Mitzi is the widower of Frank Perdue, who is a marketing genius, a legend of his time. I think everybody on this on listening right now knows the Perdue name. It is one of the iconic brands that Frank started literally from scratch. And so, unless you're living under a rock, you've heard of the Perdue name. Maybe you're not old enough yet. Like me, I remember the commercials. I remember watching Frank Perdue be in those commercials. And I just made sure to write this down to make sure I have it correct. The Perdue brand, Perdue Farms, is a $6.7 billion enterprise today. Its parent company, Perdue Foods, it's the parent company of Perdue Foods and Perdue Agribusiness. Perdue Foods, obviously, being the producer of major chicken, turkey, pork processing in the United States. And Perdue Agribusiness ranks among the top United States grain companies. 6.7 billion is nothing to sneeze at. Now, Mitzi was Frank's widow, but she is also a tremendous, very successful entrepreneur. She's an author, she's a speaker, a consultant. I have here her family founded the Henderson Estate Company, which dates back to 1840 and was the forerunner for the Sheraton Hotels brand. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Her father was co-founder of the chain. She is the former president of the American Agri-Women, which has about 40,000 members, and one of the U.S. delegates to the United Nations Conference on Women in Nairobi. She's also releasing a new book that's coming out called Relentless, where she shares her wisdom of the Chicken Soup for the Soul author, Mark Victor Hansen. She has also authored many other books regarding running a family business and the Perdue Company. So, even though some of you might not be familiar with Mitzi, I can assure you she's a badass. So Mitzi, welcome to the podcast.
I love being a badass. Yay.
Well, why would you want to be anything less, right? So Mitzi, what are you drinking?
It's a Cabernet, and it is from Apothic Crush. And the reason...
Yeah.
Okay, I love wine. However, I'm visiting my sister in New Hampshire, and this is from her cellar, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm about to find out.
Okay, well, cheers. Have a drink to you, right?
Cheers.
So check out. I did this just for you now, right? This is by Alley Vineyards. It's called the Black Chicken, and I got it just for this.
Love it.
I was drinking it on another podcast. I was down at my beach house in Florida, and I don't know, I just picked it up, and I really like it. It's a Zinfandel, And the Robert Bialy Vineyards actually started out as a chicken farm out in California.
No way.
Yeah, and they started growing their own grapes and making their own wine, and it was kind of like, sort of on the down low. I don't think they had a real liquor license at the time, so they were selling it to people who were coming to buy the eggs and the chicken. And so when someone would show up, they would order a black chicken, which was code for bottle of wine, and hence the name. So,
well, actually, I'm in the wine business. When my father died, I was 28.
Oh, wow.
And he died quite young at age 70. Nobody had expected that a heart attack would just make him go like that, which means that at age 28, I came into an inheritance. He had 400 hotels, and it was a family-owned business. I mean, it was publicly traded, but we owned most of it. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do with all this money? And we've sold the hotels. I was living in California at the time, and I spent 4 years studying agronomy, rural appraisal, agricultural economics, just everything to do with that I could find for 4 years. And then I invested in agricultural property and invested, well, first of all in rice, but then much more fun, vineyards.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting. So how old were you when you came into that inheritance? You were 26? Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So were you running the business, or did you just come into the inheritance? Were you involved in it?
Oh, it was interesting because we're talking 1967 when my father died.
Right.
And back then, I think it's almost hard to grasp how different things are today from back then, because I honestly don't think that anybody in my family or any of the people that my family would have had anything to do with ever considered having a woman run the business.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I had virtually nothing to do with it. But I fast forward maybe 20 years to the case of Frank Perdue. He always wanted his kids involved. They had summer jobs. So it was, it's almost earth-shattering, the difference between how women are how perceived now versus back then.
Yeah, no, it's a totally different world. Yeah, I don't. People say to me, Robin, I respect you because you're in this, you're a powerhouse in a male-dominated industry, and I hate that word because it kind of leaves a perception that men dominate. Now, there's more men in the industry, but I'm very careful about words, and I can say that I run this business, and I have a lot of men for clients. I have men who work for me, and I honestly, Mitzi, I cannot remember. And I'm trying to really think now, like going way back, like if we go 30, 40 years ago, right, it's a little different, but I've been running this business now for 20 years. And
awesome.
Honestly, awesome. Yeah, I've never had any issue there where I felt like I wasn't given an opportunity or wasn't listened to because I was a woman. Like I don't know if this industry is different. I don't know if it's just, I don't notice those things, but it is definitely a different world. So I can appreciate that. Yeah.
But I feel qualified to talk about how it's changed over the years, because it'd be hard for me to explain why, but I always wanted to work. Mm-hmm. I just did. And the jobs that I had, they were always non-traditional for women. Like my first job out of college was, I was a management intern in the Treasury Department in Washington. And there were 21 guys and me. And actually, I never felt it was a disadvantage at all. Or even in college, I was drawn to like economics and government classes, and there could be 200 men in an economics class and me. And I thought it was a fantastic advantage because, to my mind, part of success is visibility. And, if I raised my hand in that economics class, I knew I was going to be called on. I mean, it was just, it was almost an unfair advantage. Yeah. I also became a farm broadcaster, and I think there were like 750 farm broadcasters, of which 3 were women. And then I became a rice farmer, and there were 5,000 rice growers. And I think there were around 10 women. And I never felt it was a disadvantage. I felt that it was a spectacular advantage.
Mhm.
But I want to say, as long as we're talking about non-traditional jobs, I had an attitude as somebody who was knowingly in a non-traditional job, in every case. I wanted to do such a good job and be such a team member that they'd want to hire the next woman. Because I was aware that I was a little bit of a trailblazer just because of the age. We're talking 1960s, 1970s.
Yeah.
And as somebody who wishes women well, I wanted to make it easier for the people who followed me to get jobs and be treated right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't that altruistic. I just wanted to make money. And I figured if I did the best job I could, I just, people will hire you, they'll do business with you, they'll work for you, they'll be loyal to you because of who you are and what you know and your skills and so forth. And yeah, I've never seen it as an advantage or disadvantage. I've always felt that, especially, the IT industry, I know everyone says, oh, it's male dominated, but I really have never felt that at all. Like I've never felt like, less than just because of that. So anyway, but so are you still involved in all those businesses, or have you sold them?
My sons have taken over the wine grapes and the rice farming. I sold that at the time that I married Frank Perdue and invested it in wine grapes, and my sons now run that.
Okay.
And
where are you based? Are you out in California?
I'm not. And I'm in Salisbury, Maryland, which is the headquarters for Perdue Farms. And it was so cool because, I'm a hotel heiress. Why would Frank Perdue be interested in me? Well, it worked out just gloriously because I was also a rice farmer, and we decided that chicken and rice would go well together.
Yeah. Chicken and rice is like one of the dishes I grew up on. Let me tell you what, a little Campbell's soup on that thing. It's great. It's awesome. So are you still involved in, or when you married Frank, did you merge the businesses? Did you do business together? Like how did, or did you kept what you did separate?
Oh, when we married, I told him, I'm heavily involved in this business and I'm going to have to fly back, 3,000 miles to California every couple of weeks. And he thought that was okay. Mm-hmm. And then to my amazement, I got so involved in what he was doing. And I did have two sons who were able to take over that it would turn out that 5 years would go by without my coming back to see how things were going. But I'm very blessed because one of my sons is a Wharton graduate. And, that's the right kind of person to have managing your farms.
Right. So how did you meet Frank?
It was romantic. I was living in California, but I was head of the oldest and largest farm women's organization, American Agri-Women. And we had this premise that not everybody in agriculture has money to donate to candidates, but what we all could do was for the candidate of our choice, Republican or Democrat, and we really wanted our members to be involved with both Republicans and Democrats, that we would volunteer to work for their campaigns. And whether it was stuffing envelopes or putting on events or whatever. And I thought, well, here I'm asking everybody else to do this. I should do it. And why not aim big? And I decided, we're talking 1988, I decided to work for Bob Dole, who was a presidential candidate, who was very supportive of agriculture. Well, I took time off, lived in Washington, D.C. for weeks working on his campaign, and he washed up in the primaries. And I'm feeling so bad because, I'd invested time and money and it was just not going to pay off. My last day there, there was a party for people who had supported him, and Frank Perdue was there. And so we met. He was kind of intrigued that I was a rice farmer. I was certainly intrigued that he was a chicken grower. But the first 5 minutes were spent talking about how we were both divorced, how we wouldn't consider the notion of the concept of the possibility of ever remarrying because we'd never trust anybody again.
Oh, wow.
And then 5 minutes into it, he looked down at me. By the way, Frank was quite tall. He was over 6 feet.
Oh, okay.
Frank looked down at me and he said, I believe I could trust you. I looked up at him. I said, I believe I could trust you. And the next 5 minutes were spent talking about what our marriage would be like.
Oh, wow.
And, and then I had to leave.
He didn't waste any time. He's honing in on that thing, he's like, okay,
well,
close the deal.
I got back to California and would talk on the phone. And the first words he said in the first phone call was, "I've never been more serious in my life." And I said, "Me too." I came back to visit him. And within 5 hours of knowing him in person, he gave me my engagement ring.
Wow. Okay.
When I had been in 36 hours, we went to see the minister who married us. And our church back then, I don't know what it is today, but it had a 6 weeks prenuptial counseling period. They don't want you to rush into something. Mm-hmm. And so one of my favorite moments in life was Reverend Drazel said, "I'm so happy for you. This is wonderful. How long have you known each other?" And I said, I'm looking at my watch, and I said 36 hours. That he found that pretty shocking. He said, marriage is a serious sacrament. You can't just rush into something like that. I'll at least need to talk with you separately. And he talked with me for an hour, and he asked me a lot of questions about my father. And I described a man who was very, very smart, just plain savvy, not very good at being expressive, probably somewhat focused. And at the end of it, Reverend Drazel said, "Do you realize you've just described in every aspect your future husband?" So anyway, 6 weeks later, we got married, and that was after knowing each other in person 6 weeks and 3 days. And it was a glorious marriage of 17 years until he passed.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but my husband and I met at a club in downtown Nashville, and we exchanged phone numbers. He was going into the special selections in the Army. And so he had to go off for he's going off for like a month, and he's like, "I don't know if I come back, I'm going to re-enlist. I won't see you, blah, blah." Gave me all these things. I was like, "Look, here's my number. If you get back in Nashville, call me, we'll have a drink." And he says, he went through selection. He kept that number with him at all times, and he got back, he gave me a call, and we hung out for about a week. And after that, he had to move back to Chicago because he had like a period where he was going to re-enlist. And we just hit it off so well. I said, "This is crazy, but why don't you just move in with me and we'll see if it works." And that was like after knowing him for a week. And I made sure I did not tell my father, I didn't want to tell too many people. I'm like, this is nuts, right? But I'm like, I feel way better because now you're telling me you got married to him, and I'm like, what, 6 hours or something? I mean, okay. And it worked out for me too. I mean, so that's good. Yeah.
How long have you been married?
We got married we got together in 98. We got married in 2001. So
you've had a long marriage. Yay.
Yeah. So, and we still like each other. So that's a good thing. So, I know it's kind of funny because I'm talking to you, and clearly, you've very successful businesses and you understand that. How did that work out with the two of you both being sort of entrepreneurial, like sort of powerhouses? Because I often think because the business I run absorbs so much of my time. And if my husband helps me in the business, he doesn't have his own, but I feel like if he was doing the same thing, I feel like we almost, I don't know, we wouldn't see each other. I mean, how did that work out?
Actually, sometimes people ask me about balance in life, and I'm not a fan of balance. I want to go all in, as strong as I can. And it worked just great for me that Frank had the same personality. So yeah, he was never going to find me saying, "Oh, darling, stay home and watch television with me" or something. Nope, worked that way. But I also felt that we were very complementary because I haven't grown up in the hotel industry. I think that entertaining is the answer to the universe. And Frank needed that because his as a businessman, I think I fit in. My impression of myself is that I fit in pretty well as a corporate wife because I love entertaining. I love, interacting with the people who work for Perdue. Mm-hmm. and that seemed to mean a very great deal to him. So I felt that I was this is very presumptuous of me to say, but I'm going to say what I feel. I felt that I was a force multiplier for him. I thought that I was a real partner in areas that I could do that wouldn't be as easy for him to do. And the first week of our marriage, I told him we'd just come back from a glorious honeymoon, and I told him, Franklin, I think we should entertain every single person who works for the company. And he said, that's incredibly impractical. There's 16,000 people, which was how many there were in 1988. Mm-hmm. And I pretended that I hadn't really understood that he was saying no. And I said, I bet we could start 6 weeks from now. And his answer was, oh, that's way too soon. And I said, let's have them 100 at a time. And he was we went round and round with him saying no and me planning it.
Right.
But then, after a few more going round and round with him saying no and me pretending that I didn't understand that he was saying no, his attitude began to change. And it was sort of, maybe there's something to it. Mm-hmm. And then, there came a moment where he said, I like it. And that did begin almost 16 years, until ill health made it impossible, where 3 times a month for most months of the year would have 100 people from the company for dinner at our place. And Frank was just incredibly good at this because, he's, in my opinion, kind of Mr. Big. He's the man whose name appears on the check of of our guests. But we would have buffet dinners. And sometimes, or actually most times, he would stand behind the buffet along with other servers and he'd wait on his employees. I mean, isn't that cool that somebody who is employing 16,000 and eventually 20,000 people would wait on their employees?
So, so it wasn't just executives. You went through the whole company. You would just down to the guy plucking the chickens and.
Yeah, truckers, veterinarians. I mean, everybody. Mm-hmm. And would invite them in groups where people would know each other, because I, from the hospitality industry, knew that it might be intimidating to somebody to come to the big boss's house. But if you're coming with 99 other people who work with you, there's sort of, I don't know.
No, very smart. Yeah, very smart.
Exactly.
Make them feel comfortable. Right.
Yeah. And at the end of the evening, Frank would stand up in front of, these people who are his employees, but he's treating as valued guests. He'd tell them what was going on in the company. And, the story that I'm telling right now, it's really about employee engagement, mm-hmm. because Frank had a deep belief that people want to feel important, that the deepest, he would quote to me, there's a psychiatrist from like 1900, his name was William James, who said that the deepest principle of human nature is the craving for appreciation. And at these parties, Frank could show appreciation. And, he'd answer employee questions. He'd tell what was, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what was going on in the company. And at the end of every evening, in different words each time, but sort of from the heart, he'd look out at, 100 people and he'd say, I know this company wouldn't be what it is today if it weren't for you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Is that not cool?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. That's incredible. When Perdue Farms, when did he start? Was it 1920? Am I remembering that right?
You're good. Now, his father started it the year Frank was born. So Perdue Farms came into existence 1920. And by 1940, Frank had started out, he was, his daughters don't really like it when I put it this way, but he was a college dropout. Mm-hmm. He started out at the teacher's college, and 2 years into it, he thought, I need to take off some time to figure out what I really want to do, because I don't think I'll make a good teacher. And he might have gone back to college, but he didn't. I mean, in effect, he was a dropout, because while taking time off to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, he began working for his father and decided that he really liked it. And his father, when Frank first started, there were no employees. By the time of his death, there were 20,000. And Yeah, my view of it, other people might look at it differently, but my view is that Frank brought the company from a father and son operation to a global behemoth, and that
Right.
it was largely Frank's energy and marketing ability. And if you had asked him, what part of the business do you like best? He would have answered, and I did ask him this, he would have answered marketing.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
But he just loved the art of it. He loved every part of it. I mean, if you'd gone, his library had books in it a little bit like what I see in the background of your office. I just crammed with books.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were in marketing. I mean, he knew the greats.
Yeah.
And he could
Yeah.
quote them.
So I know, because he started out, he was basically, I think, pretty shy, kind of awkward, not socially, if I remember, like I watched a couple bios, because I mean, for someone like me who's in marketing and advertising, I mean, you look at something like Frank Perdue and his style of advertising, the quality, the money back, I think it was a money back guarantee, the tagline, which was really good. It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. I mean, a lot of that was like, you didn't see that in like, chickens, like, or so, I mean, he really was a pioneer of advertising and marketing, starring in his own TV commercials. And I want to ask you about all that. So, I guess start out with, so his dad owned the business, he takes over. Where did he learn business and marketing then? If he dropped out of school, like, where did he learn it?
Okay, to me, he must have had amazing instincts. And I'm always, we're getting philosophical for a moment, but I'm always fascinated where creativity comes from, because, he grew up on a farm I don't know what the population of Salisbury was back then, but let's say it was 700 or 800.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't grow up like in a big city exposed to marketing. How could it be that somebody could just understand how important marketing was? And yet he did. And he told me that here's how it came to him. He wanted to produce a superior product. But that means, feeding the chickens better. There's a whole lot of things that go into having a superior bird, but most of them make it more expensive. And so his line of thinking was, if I have the best bird, it is going to cost more. I need to communicate with the buying public why it's better. How can you do that? Well, the answer was advertising. So he told me that I'm going to guess that he was possibly in his mid-40s. I mean, the answer is known, but I'm just not remembering exactly. But let's say mid-40s, he figured out that if he was going to expand, that he needed to communicate why his birds were more expensive. And so he took off, I think it was like 8 weeks, going to New York, which was just a foreign country for him. And he joined the Association of, I think it's marketers, to access their library. And he told me that he'd just spend hours and hours in the library, first reading magazine articles on advertising, and then books, and then he'd call the authors of the articles, and they might be university professors. And Frank, you're correct that he was a very shy person, and yet somehow he transcended his shyness. And there he is, a guy that people described him as initially so almost foreign in New York, that it was as if he was chewing on a straw and had high lace button boots. I mean, he just wasn't a New Yorker at that point, but that didn't stop him. He just plunged in to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so after total immersion of studying everything he could in the library, then he made a grid of Manhattan, of the streets, and he'd mark out all the butchers. And he'd go visit, very, very methodically, he'd visit all the butchers and ask, what was important to them for what would make them think would be a good ad. And then he'd go to the newspapers and ask the same thing. And then he'd go to the radio and television. And at the end, I think I think I bet every penny that I've got that he knew more about advertising than any poultry person before him had ever even imagined.
Well, more than probably a lot of people who've gone to school for marketing, because I mean, I use the term serious student. That's a serious student, somebody who's willing to put in the time and be curious and learn that. So, I mean, that's phenomenal.
Okay, but there's another part to it that I just treasure, which is all along the way, every single person that had asked was saying, it's ridiculous to advertise a commodity. It's never been done. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow he had the insight and the wisdom and the vision to see that advertising would be right for a commodity. And so in spite of everybody telling him, the conventional wisdom is don't do it, he did it. And good Lord, it paid off, because it catapulted him from being a little backwater producer to being in the top tier of chicken producers of the country and eventually the world.
Yeah.
And that's the power of advertising, by the way, because he had a very strong view, and he was quoting some advertising expert. You might know who it was. I can't off the top of my head remember, but somebody said, nothing kills a bad product faster than good advertising. In other words, if you're going to advertise, you better have something great to back it up.
Right.
And he felt, my chickens are better. They're a breed that's plumper, that's, and, our ways of handling it, it's going to make it, fresher, tenderer. And, he had the courage of his convictions to follow through when it was universally believed at that point that you don't advertise a commodity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I say he was a pioneer. I mean, he really was. I mean, when you look at and you think, I don't know if it was something that Frank had said. This one I'm a little unsure of, but I have heard the quote that if Frank Perdue could differentiate a dead chicken, you can differentiate your products. I don't know. Is that something Nito said, or what? Like, is that something Frank said? Or maybe I heard it from Nito.
Well, I'll tell you what Frank Perdue said on the subject. He felt that there was just vastly more difference between the quality of chickens and, say, the quality of dishwasher soap. And his view was kind of the opposite of the wisdom you were just describing. He was saying, if you can differentiate dishwasher soap, which is awfully similar, you surely ought to be able to differentiate the quality of a chicken.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and so Mitzi, you don't know this about me, but one of the things I teach in my principle is, and my clients sell services. So I always say service marketing starts with the service. In other words, you got to have something worth marketing before you go out there and start advertising. Another thing I'll say is, if the sales letter is hard to write, the product is flawed. Meaning, a lot of people they come to me and they want me to come up with some kind of clever slogan or a really cool looking website or something. And I ask them, well, why should a prospect buy from you? Like, what is different about you? And a lot of times they just can't answer that. They don't know. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to help you? So I teach a principle I call EDR, educational direct response. So it's all about driving leads and response, but educational in the sense of, if you've got a superior product, and that should be your goal, is to have, and superior, there's different ways of looking at superior, right? I mean, Neiman Marcus has a superior product for their customers, as does Walmart for theirs, right? So, superior is in the eye of the beholder of the prospect you're talking to. But I'm really big on educating. Because just in preparing for this, I went back and watched some of his commercials. YouTube's great. I mean, you could go on YouTube.
Love it.
Yeah. And that's what he was doing in his commercials. He was talking about, he had a frozen chicken. I remember one of them, he's walking out of a supermarket and he says, that guy won't carry my chicken because he doesn't like the fact that he has to clean up because it's going to be wet because it's not frozen. So it takes a little bit more to handle. And, he just kind of went into this explanation of saying, that's why not everybody carries my chicken, because they don't want to carry a superior product that's not frozen. Or, there was another one, he's walking along a hall, like coming down the steps, and he's showing all the different chickens and he's telling people, look, we've gone through multiple, there's this kind of chicken and here's where they're not great. And then there's this kind of chicken. And what he's doing is he's educating the public. And by doing that, he's making it interesting. I mean, you go into a store now and you have that in your head and you see these frozen chickens or you see these other things and you go, it just kind of sticks with you because now you feel like you're a more educated consumer and you almost feel foolish buying an inferior product because all the flaws with it. You feel like it's like a waste of money. And I thought, Frank, to me, that's the thing he was super at, not only educating the public on what is good, creating that superior product, but then also advertising it. And the other thing I think that connected with people, maybe you can talk about this, is he started in his own commercials. And I think the sense people got is this is not some paid slick actor. I mean, you'll forgive me. I know I remember you even talking about it. They used to, there was kind of people would kid him about looking like a chicken, and he would think it was funny, but, so he's not this, movie star looking, well articulate. Not that I shouldn't say that because he's a very intelligent, articulate, but not somebody you would say, let's star him on a TV commercial. Yet he did all his commercials. And I think that came across also as very genuine. Like, I'm the owner of the company. I care about my product. I care about you. And again, this is all unique. And it was like very pioneering. Like, so I don't know if you want to wrap, whatever you want to wrap around that.
Oh, I would love to monologue on that subject because you're touching the core of me. I mean, because I was a Frank groupie. I just admired him so much. So, but I'm also a writer by trade. So I used to keep a little notebook, and it had to look strange to people, but I did it, and I got away with it for 17 years. I would write down things that he said and what he felt about things, and I got thousands of pages of quotes on him. And I know exactly how it happened that he appeared in the ads because he didn't want to. He had interviewed like 80 different, 60 different advertising agencies before settling on Scally McCabe. And Scally McCabe said, Ed McCabe, who was the copywriter, said, the reason that we don't advertise commodities is because whatever you say about your Perdue chickens, your competitors can say the same things. You advertise mine are fresh, they can say mine are fresh. You can advertise mine are tasty, your competitors can say mine are tasty. But Ed McCabe said, the only thing that they can't possibly duplicate, sir, is you, because you look like a chicken, you squawk like a chicken. And Frank didn't want to do it because as he told Ed McCabe and as he told me, he had never even been in a high school play. He was actually, I would categorize him like initially maybe in the bottom 10% for shyness. I mean, it's almost as if his greatest deficit, shyness, became his greatest strength because he overcame it. But so here he is, having to be in ads, and he didn't want to. And he told me, but also his daughter, Beverly Perdue, told me that for like 6 weeks before shooting the first commercial, he was practicing. And he had learned somewhere, he'd picked up the idea that you have to give to the camera. And so there he is on the first shoot, and he's giving to the camera. And Ed McCabe told me that he had to dial him back to have something that would work. And I loved it that he put so much effort into something that was completely foreign to him, and yet eventually he mastered it.
Yeah.
So for somebody who didn't want to be in the commercials, he was darn good at it. But there was, I think the commercials had several things going for them, including what you mentioned, which is immense authenticity. Like when he was like delivering lines, if there wasn't something that he in his soul didn't believe, he'd insist that change it. An example that I have of this is there was some line somewhere in one of the ads where it talks about bankers giving you a loan. And that bothered him. Banks don't give you a loan, they make you a loan. And so he was unwilling to say it unless he just absolutely believed every word, which I thought was really cool. The other thing was he had no problem being self-deprecating. I mean, let me amend that. It's not that I know that he was perfectly willing to exploit the fact that that he looked like a chicken and he squawked like a chicken. He was self-deprecating, and he once even told me, kind of advising me, that one of the more attractive things you can do in human relations is being self-deprecating. Not being afraid to make fun of yourself. And I think he mastered that.
But I don't think it was fake. I think that's why it worked, because when you watch those commercials, and I would recommend everybody who's watching this should go watch those commercials. I mean, and study them. You don't get a sense that he is disingenuous and, like you said, just extreme authenticity. You get the sense that this is he really cares. And I think human beings, I think the actors can fake, but I think really at the end of the day, we know if someone is being honest and genuine. And I think that was one part of his secret sauce. I think him being in those commercials, because so many big corporations, they're nameless, faceless corporations. You don't know. I mean, you kind of know who the CEO is, but you don't really know who the CEO is, or you do know, and I don't know, they don't communicate with the customers and the public, and they're just kind of hidden behind a veil. And I think that's a mistake. I think, CEOs, and I do know Frank said this in one of the interviews I watched, that he said, it's important that the CEO of a company be the face and name, that you are the one that people know when you buy my product, I'm the person behind it. I'm the one making sure it's quality. I'm the one making sure it's everything it should be and everything I'm saying it is. I'm the heart and soul, that sort of thing. And so, that's not something most advertising books teach you. They teach you how to wordsmith, how to put the veneer on, how to put the polish on, but they don't really talk about being genuine. And I think it was important back then. It's always been important. But today, in today's environment, Mitzi, I think you'll agree, having authenticity and believability and being genuine, and admitting a flaw, if there is a flaw, right? Admitting it actually endears people to you.
I said that he thought that being self-deprecating was a good thing, but he was conscious of it, but he also, it was genuine that he was self-deprecating. And as for the authenticity, I took a year-long course in public speaking. And the biggest thing that I walked away with was, the deeper it comes from you, the deeper it reaches your audience. And that kind of gets right back to authenticity. If you're really speaking that, Frank loved his chickens, he loved his audience. I think the essence of Frank somehow came through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And with an actor just reciting the lines, I don't think it would have ever had the impact.
Right. Who came up with that line? It takes a tough man. Was that it takes a tough man to make a tender chicken? Was that Ed McCabe, the copywriter, or was that Frank?
It was the copywriter. And I know the story behind how Ed McCabe came up with that, because I became friendly with Ed McCabe, just because he was a friend of Frank. So I felt perfectly free to ask him questions. And so I asked him, how did you come up with that? And he said when he first took over the account, he thought that, I'm up against something impossible, because it really is true that up to then, you didn't advertise a commodity. And so Ed McCabe's thinking, what can I do to make this work? And so he'd follow Frank around, like in the processing facilities or the chicken farms or whatever. And he realized, I think the people who worked with him loved him, but he was tough and he was demanding. And I kind of think it's a little bit like the coach of a football team. A successful one is not some marshmallow. No, let's say it's a guy, he's demanding and is tough and just brings out the best. And I kind of think that's what Frank was. And Ed McCabe, after spending a few days with Frank, realized, yep, that's the essence of it. It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken.
Yeah. I mean, it's a brilliant piece of copy. I mean, because I study copywriting. I am a copywriter. And just, and you're right. I mean, I think I put myself in Ed McCabe's position, and, most marketers or copywriters, we write to a formula, we create ads to a formula. And, here he is with this commodity that, how do you differentiate this thing? Right. And, so, I mean, it really is a brilliant case study in just differentiation in running a business. Really, really phenomenal.
Can I jump in and tell something somewhat funny and maybe illuminating about Ed McCabe, the copywriter?
Yeah, sure.
He told me that he had what under most circumstances would be a dream client, somebody who was going to sell furniture like sofas, and was willing to spend everything in the world to have the kind of success that Frank Perdue had. And Ed McCabe turned him down because he said, "You don't look like a sofa. You don't talk like a sofa. There's no relationship between you and the brand." And Ed said, for the kind of marketing that Frank did, there had to be just a tight-knit connection between the spokesperson and the brand. And boy, he had it with Frank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's amazing. What else? I mean, we know what we see, and we know that it was a success. Talk about the journey of him figuring out like marketing, distribution, because I would think, it's like for me, I'm selling direct to consumer, but with what Frank is doing, he's got to convince store owners to carry the product, because he could do all the advertising he wants, but if people are like, can't go buy the product, it's just wait. So how did he use a similar tactic to get people to carry the product, or was there difficulty there? Did he start with the advertising and create demand and then go do you know that?
Yeah, actually I do. He had several approaches. Among them back then, and we're talking late 1960s, 70s, if you're a grocery store owner, one of your absolute infinite headaches was that you couldn't get a reliable delivery of the product that you needed. And Frank wanted to figure out a way that he would be so reliable that he'd be on the equivalent of speed dial for any what's the word I'm looking for? What's the intermediary between the supermarket and the
distributors? Or
distributor is the word that I'm looking for. Thank you. And by the way, can I blame that
on drinking?
Yeah. So you're going to forgive me for not remembering the word distributor. Right?
That's why I do this. So that way, when I say stupid things, I can always blame that I was drinking when I said it. You got to give me a little, free pass.
Okay. I want my free pass, but with the distributors.
Okay.
For both the distributors and the grocery store owners, it was an infinite headache to have a reliable supply. And if you don't have a reliable supply, you're missing a lot of sales if the chicken isn't there when the customer is.
Right.
And Frank realized that was a way that he could differentiate himself was, well, let me back up. Why are the supplies unreliable? And that is, it has to do with trucking. Mm-hmm. Supposing that you want a truckload of chicken delivered to your distributor in New York. Supposing that trucker, and I'm going to make up a figure, but supposing, and since we're talking 30 or 40 years ago, I have no idea what the actual one, but this is going to be directionally accurate if it's not numerically accurate. Supposing that you contract with a delivery trucker, with a trucker, to deliver a load of chicken to Manhattan or outside of to New York City, outside. And you're paying him $1,000. But supposing that there's a strawberry grower who knows that if he doesn't get his strawberries to the market on time, they're all going to turn to mush. And so he's going to offer the trucker $2,000. You've only offered $1,000. Pretty soon you find that your chickens aren't delivered. And by not controlling the delivery of it, it just was creating endless headaches for the distributors and the grocers. So Frank thought, how do I get around that? Frank went into the trucking business. Today, if Perdue were a trucker, if that was our whole business, I think would be the 50th largest trucking business in the country.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So he got a handle on the bottleneck and on the chokehold on the business and said, yeah, we got to fix this, or yeah, it's going to be a detriment. Right.
Yeah. So, somebody dealing with Perdue would know, because we hired the people and we owned the trucks, that they weren't going to be distracted by some better offer somewhere if you've got a steady job with Perdue, which I think just, how insightful. That was just so new.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing. You think about, okay, it's just, your job is just to sell chicken. Seems pretty simple, but there's so many moving parts and things that, when you're selling through, retail. We watch it on Shark Tank, right now, if some of them are like having to sell through retail, Damon will like get on them because he knows retail. Lori Grenier knows it as well. And it's a tough business when you can't sell directly to the consumer. You've got this distributor, then you've got the store that's selling it, and then you've got your end customer, and so much can happen to your product in between, and the conversation coming back. So it's a tough. It's funny. It takes a tough man, but it really is a tough business.
But how much insight to figure? He'd never. What did Frank Perdue know about trucking?
Right, exactly.
But he was willing to study it and learn about it and get into it and do it, which as I've said before, I was a Frank Perdue groupie. I just admired him so much.
Right. And by the way, I'm getting a message here. It was Jerry. Someone posted. It was Jerry Della Femina that said nothing kills a bad product faster than good advertising. So I didn't know that one. That's a new one to me. So I appreciate someone posting that. That's very cool. So Mitzi, we're getting close on time here. I want to talk, because you've got a new book coming out, right? And you are, I believe that you're part of, you are very active in stopping human trafficking, I believe. Why don't we tell us a little bit, how'd you get involved in that? Tell us about the book. Just talk about that a little bit.
Okay. I got involved with combating human trafficking maybe 3 years ago. And the more I heard about it, it just seemed like one of the most atrocious things that happens in the world. And it is the fastest growing crime in the world. It's a $40 billion a year industry. I just misspoke. It's a $150 billion a year industry. There are 40 million people who are trafficked each year.
Wow.
The amount of suffering is just, this is modern day slavery. And when I heard about it, I couldn't unhear it. And I started thinking, what could I do? What could I do? I'm one person. What could I do? And it occurred to me that there were a couple of things I could bring to the table, because I'm not going to be able to rescue a girl. I'm not going to be able, I thought, I interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of anti-trafficking organizations and learned that pretty much all of them have in common the following: they'd like more awareness and they'd like more money. Well, I'm a writer. I can contribute to awareness. And today I write a weekly column for Psychology Today. It's a blog on there. It's an online blog, and it's on combating human trafficking. So I've interviewed almost 100 different anti-trafficking organizations telling their stories and their approaches. So I feel really good about that. I also am helping with fundraising. And it occurred to me that the best fundraising I could do is, I am a writer, and I've written this biography of Mark Victor Hansen. It's dedicated to survivors of human trafficking and to those who help combat human trafficking. And every penny of the royalties of it, I'm going to give to anti-trafficking. And so, my two approaches are awareness and money. And if anybody wants to get the book, I've decided, since I'm, guess what? I don't really need the money from the book. I'm extremely happy to donate copies of the book to any anti-trafficking organization who somebody will give $10 to combating human trafficking. I will give my $24.95 ebook to the person who makes the donation. And anybody who wants to learn more about that, please write to me at Mitzi, and it's going to be Mitzi at mitziperdue.com. Mitzi is Mitzi at Mitzi Perdue. And the tricky thing is Perdue is spelled Perdue.
Right.
Because everybody wants to make me the university, which I'd love, but no, Perdue Chicken is spelled Perdue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm doing, I'm like messaging right now with Karen. If Karen, you're there, right? I see. I'm kind of like seeing you in the background.
Hi, Karen.
I'm here. Yes.
So Karen, maybe you can post that out. I don't know, Mitzi. I mean, Mitzi, do you have one nonprofit that you work with the most, or you would recommend if people wanted to, if they like this podcast and they got something like, guys, if you got something from this, $5, $10, something, what is there a charity that you would recommend, Mitzi, that people go donate to?
Yeah, there is. The Red Cross at this moment is helping with Ukraine, with the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine generates all sorts of refugees who are the perfect prey for traffickers. Traffickers will come along to some woman who's crossed the border and they'd say, I've got a job for you. I've got a nice warm place for you to spend the night. And then they disappear into sex trafficking and they're never heard from again. Anything that helps refugees in Ukraine will attract human trafficking. So anybody who wants to give to the Red Cross, but I would like to donate my book for this effort. My book isn't quite out yet. It will be out, I hope, early June.
Okay.
So if they'll contact me, Mitzi at mitziperdue.com, I will put them in my nice Excel spreadsheet. And when the book comes out, I'll send them to a website that will both get them the book free and send them to the Red Cross
to make a donation. Yeah.
Make a donation. Or if they want to donate blood, even better.
Right. I'll buy a couple books. I'm a little queasy about the whole blood thing, you know what I mean? I'll just write a check. Okay. But here's what I'll do, Mitzi, when your book comes out, let us know, and happy to email my list and drive. Let's organize it so that we can make sure that the money is going to a really good organization that will stop human trafficking. One of my friends, James Lawrence, I don't know if you're familiar with James Lawrence. He's called the Iron Cowboy. He did 101 Ironmans back to back.
Oh my God. Yeah,
you have no idea. It's insane. He did 50 and that got him on and then he just did 100 and then decided 100 was enough. So he did one more. And then
what's this guy's name? Because I've got to know more about him.
James Lawrence. And if you Google Iron Cowboy, I've had him on speak at my events twice. And he is a very, very big champion of stopping human trafficking, and he donates a lot of money to that as a cause. I think I don't know the name of the organization. I think there's one out in Utah that he particularly recommends that, because when you promote it like you're doing now, people okay, well, which one do I, because there's a lot of good ones there, so he has one. So I need to connect you with him. And then maybe when,
because maybe I'm perfectly happy to promote the cause that he's for. I basically love all anti-trafficking efforts because it's going to take all of us to make a dent in this.
Right. So when your book comes out, let's collaborate and we can, promote it out maybe with a donation, and we'll do something. Let's do something when your book comes out, and just help you in that cause, because it's a great cause, and this has been a great interview, and I appreciate you taking time with us, having a drink, telling us stories about Frank. It's always just, he was an absolute icon, and you're a powerhouse. I think, when I advertise this, obviously people know Frank better than they know Mitzi, but obviously, you're no shrinking flower there. You're a powerhouse and just dynamo.
I'm badass. I want to, Karen said that I was badass. I want to go with that.
Okay, we'll go with badass. Badass is good too. Karen likes that. So Karen, I think you had one last question that came up. You want to ask the question that everybody wants to know?
Super important, Mitzi. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. Well,
Do we have time for that?
I was almost saved by the bell.
Yeah. I was gonna say, was that Karen? Was that your phone going off? Was that
Nope.
you?
Okay, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I can show you something that will prove that the chickens came first,
Okay.
but I have a hobby. I decorate eggs. This is an ostrich egg.
Wow, look at that.
Okay. All right, it was
Beautiful.
inspired by the fact that Frank was known as the chicken man. I wanted to be the egg lady. The chickens came first.
That's awesome. All right, very cool. Well, and that's
By the way,
beautiful.
this is a handbag.
Okay, wow, that's beautiful. So you should sell those for charity. I mean, do you make them yourself then? I guess that's
I make them and I design them, and you know, if you want a dozen, they're $12,500 each.
Gotcha. Okay, got it. Well, you know, you got to pay for quality, right? You know, that's the way it goes. So, all right. Well, Mitzi, thank you so much for being part of this. Again, guys, if you like it, comment, like, subscribe. Make sure you join and subscribe so you can get notifications when we do interviews like this. With that, we'll wrap up this episode of Great Minds Drink Alike. Mitzi, this is cheers to you. Karen, cheers to you.
Cheers. Loved it.
All right. And happy Friday, everybody.